walking the Noble Eightfold Path is not as simple as a linear progression. It is actually a very cyclic sort of practice. And we talked about the three most important factors, which are right view, right mindfulness, and right effort. And foremost, you must have the Sati, or mindfulness, to remember the right view. Remind yourself to put it into practice. And in a more fundamental way, to look back at your mind. Only when you look back at your mind can you identify whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. And then only can you apply right effort. Right? If you cannot identify what is wholesome or unwholesome, how are you going to proceed? That is the fifth hindrance. The fifth hindrance is doubts. And it is defined in the sutras as the inability to decide what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. And that is the most stumbling block, because in the course of your practice, there are so many mental states that arise in you. And if you are doubtful as to how to handle them, how are you going to make progress? So you're all here very lucky, because I come from the Burmese tradition where we have daily interviews. In the Thai forest tradition, you don't have daily interviews. The Thai forest monks, they take their meditation subject from the teacher and they go off to the forest and they handle their own doubts. And if they can't handle the doubts, they come back 3 months later. Would you like to do that? So we are actually spoon feeding you guys. Okay, there are pros and cons. If you follow the Thai tradition, you have to renounce to be able to do that, to be able to spend so much time to really grapple with your own problem. And if you can really overcome them yourselves, then you learn much better than listening to me unraveling your problems or giving suggestions on how to approach your difficulties. There's a saying in Burmese, which Saro Pandita, my teacher, used to tell us. He says it's like the hunter looking for the hare in a forest. When you look for a hare in the forest, it's not easy to find. So you have to look at all the possible passages where the hare could be hiding its tracks. So when you do that, eventually you become very familiar with the forest and you can know the whole forest like the palm of a hand. Right? So if you really can spend the time, 3 months, to solve your own difficulties, you will really understand your mind very, very well. Okay, so right view is very important, it's very, very fundamental, because you need to know some theory to be able to practice. The theory is, first of all, you need to identify wholesome and unwholesome states. Anything that is motivated by greed, hate, or delusion is unwholesome. Hate and delusion are big words, and they have a different connotation in English when compared to its usage in Pali language and in our spiritual practice. When we use the word greed in English, it means wanting more than what you deserve, right? But in the ultimate sense, in Buddhism, in Buddhist practice, greed covers a wide range of ranging from lust, high-end greed, to just a mere liking, preference for coffee over tea. That is also a form of greed, but it's a low-end greed. Nevertheless, that's still greed. Wanting to become a good yogi, that's also greed. Yeah. Wanting Nirvana, that's also greed. But the interesting thing is that it's a paradox. You must have the greed for liberation, the desire to practice to be free from suffering, but it may be a starting point, but eventually in the course of the practice you find out that you don't need that anymore. It was a starting point, but in the course of the practice you'll be told that you just step back and look at things come and go. And when you see that, then things work out well. And then hate. Hate is also not a very good translation of the word dosa. Sometimes it's translated as anger. Dosa also covers a wide range of unpleasant mental feelings, but it's easier to identify than lobha or greed. Dosa ranges from intense rage and hatred. Actually, the word aversion in English means intense hate. Although nowadays we use it to mean as though it's like covers everything. The low-end hate or low-end dosa is just a subtle dislike. The slightest sense of unpleasantness in your mind, that's really dosa. Just a mere little irritation, that's really dosa. So, whatever that is motivated by these feelings, these two roots are dosa. Any thought, any speech, any action. Of course, the main culprit is delusion. Delusion means not knowing, not understanding the true nature of reality. It is precisely because of delusion that one has lobha and one has dosa. One has lobha because one does not understand, as it really is, that things are not worth going after, desiring, grasping, being attached to, clinging to. And when one has expectations and desires and attachments and so forth, we get angry when they are not fulfilled, when we are frustrated. Right? So it all boils down to delusion. Delusion is you're deluded into thinking that things are permanent, that there can be lasting happiness in the worldly things that are available through our senses and through our intellect, intellectual stimulation. And of course, what is it that gives us this false sense of gratification? Feeling. When you contact something and there's pleasant feeling, there's this natural tendency to grasp at it, to want more, to maintain it. And if something unpleasant, there is this desire to want to get rid of it. Yeah? So it comes from contact. Because of contact, that's why you have feeling. So if you look at the chain in the Paticca Samuppada, you can see that they are all interrelated. There's a conditional sequence involved. But anyway, coming back to lobha and dosa, to give you a more thorough understanding so that you can locate it and identify it in its most subtle form. The characteristic of lobha, or greed, is wanting. It comes from a sense of lacking. You lack something, so you want something to fill that emptiness. Which means to say, you are not contented with what is. You want something other than what is. The moment there is a wanting, then it's really lobha. So when you look at your mind, all our actions are motivated by this one thing, isn't it? When you get up, when you go to the toilet, you cannot just stay there and say, I don't want to give in to greed. So that sometimes we have to compromise a bit. Having this body, we have to take care of it. There are certain things that we need to allow this lobha to operate. So we have to use our discretion. That's why what I talked about yesterday, Sati Sampajanya, is so important. Sati, mindfulness, Sampajanya means clear knowing or clear comprehension. I'll come to that again later. Greed is wanting something. Various forms of intensities of lobha. Craving is really intensely wanting something. Clinging is after you have got what you wanted, you cling on to it, grasp it and refuse to let go. These are all various forms and manifestations of lobha. Then dosa is, there's another word for dosa that's called paticca in Pali. And that's a very good word to use. The word dosa actually comes from the word dusati. Dusati means to destroy. What do you destroy? You destroy your peace of mind when you have dosa, right? Because you have your peace of mind is destroyed, then you cause suffering to others and you destroy others' peace of mind as well. And pratika is also very interesting because prati means against or retaliation, to retaliate. And ga means to kill, to retaliate by killing, by harming. And that's how dosa works. It's like hitting back at an object. Whether that object is something mental in your mind when you're angry with something or some event or some person and you have not manifested it in speech or in action, it's still in your mind, there's still a lot of hitting, right? You're hitting at the object in your mind. That is the characteristic of dosa. Most importantly, if you are not able to refrain or constrain or subdue that anger within your mind, and it manifests in speech, what's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to hit at others, right? When you're unhappy, you make others unhappy as well. Then you feel happy. That's the way it is. That's the way the mind works. You don't want to be unhappy by yourself. You want others to be unhappy as well. When others are also unhappy, then you feel happy. Someone who is at peace with himself and contented will not harm anyone. Right or not? It's only when you are in a bad mood and everybody will keep away. They don't want to come into your warpath. Alright? So, anything that is motivated by this unpleasant state of mind is very easy to spot. Because it's unpleasant, you cannot fool yourself. When you have any unpleasant state of mind, you can be very sure that that's really dosa. Although lobha is not so easy to spot, because lobha can be accompanied by pleasure, it can be equanimous, it can be indifferent. And the mind is very, very clever. It can come up with all sorts of justifications for your lobha. Right? Yeah. Particularly, you monks have a lot of rules to follow. You think it's only 227, but these are the 227 major rules. There are thousands of other little rules. And then when a monk is overcome by lobha, you will have all sorts of justifications. I can take tea. Green tea is good for me, antioxidant. Coffee is good, it's supposed to be good for the blood. Research has proven that it's good for health. Who made the research? Funded by whom? Cadbury's. Chocolate is good for you. Okay, so you have to be really, really very honest with yourself, because the mind can be very tricky. It will just give all sorts of justifications for lobha and dosa to have its way. Okay, so, and then moha, of course, is not understanding true nature of reality, so we have to start somewhere, we have to start from theory. Right? The theory is that everything is actually anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, suffering, and not self, due to cause and conditioning. That is the one thing that we need to accept. That is the first part, with gathering this information and believing in it. And then, of course, reminding yourself to put that into practice. So, which means to say that you need to integrate that knowledge, that second-hand knowledge, into yourself in as many aspects of your life as possible. Not just when you come for a retreat once a year or 9 days. That's why here we try to encourage you to do the practice in your normal daily life. Don't try to slow down to such a pace that it becomes unnatural, that makes it not possible for you to continue the practice when you go back home. So we have to start somewhere, and we start here by, we do the normal activities at a normal pace, but always remind yourself to watch the mind. Why is the mind so important? Because it's the source of all your troubles and your happiness. Right or not? There's one interesting sutta that's called the Unaba Brahmana Sutta, found in the Samyutta Nikaya 48-42. Anyway, this is this Brahmin by the name of Unaba, and he approached the Buddha one day and asked him, says, Master Gautama, there are these 5 sense faculties. the eyes, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body. And each of them has their own resort and domain, which means to say that each of them has its own specific object. Right or not? The eye can only see, cannot hear, cannot smell, cannot taste. And the ear can only hear, cannot see, cannot smell, cannot taste, and so forth. Right? But what is their refuge? And who is it that experiences all their domains, all their objects? So the Buddha says, the refuge, of course, is the mind. The mind is the refuge, and it is mind that experiences their different domains. Why is the mind their refuge? I'll come back to that later. This one is a bit involved. So the Brahmin says, okay, good. Now, the mind is their refuge, and the mind experiences their separate domains. But what is the mind's refuge? Okay, what do you think? What is the mind's refuge? The mind's refuge is Sati, mindfulness. What is the refuge of mindfulness? What is the refuge of Sati? Huh? The refuge of Sati, the Buddha answered, is vimukti, liberation. And what is the refuge of liberation? And the Buddha says, the refuge of liberation is Nirvana. And of course this Brahmin will ask again now, what is the refuge of Nirvana? And then the Buddha says, stop, you have gone beyond it, you cannot question this. Because Nirvana is the ultimate aim for this holy life. You know, that is the aim, that is the destination. There's nothing beyond that. Okay, let's go back to look at Q&A. Why is the mind the refuge of the five senses? Okay, first of all, like I said earlier, each of the five senses have their own specific objects. If they just function like that, the organism cannot function. Right? The eye can only see, and the eye will say, my business is to see, I don't care what you hear. And then the body will say, my function is just to feel, to be aware of sensations. What you see and hear is none of my business. Each of them mind their own business. What will happen? Nothing is going to happen, right? The organism cannot function. So actually the mind is the CEO. It is the CPU. Right? It is coordinating all these five senses together so that the organism can function. Right? Not? So that's why the mind is their refuge. But why is Sati the refuge of the mind? Why would the mind depend on Sati? You need Sati to tell you to recollect all your past conditionings. How to do this, how to do that. You have to have your value system. Right? That's why right view is so important. It's from right view and remembering the right view to get things done in the correct way, in the way that you want. But even if it's not right view, even if it's regarding your worldly affairs, you still need to know your JD, right? Your job description, remember it, and make sure that you perform according to your JD so that your boss will like it. Okay? So, Sati is still very important. That's why in the practice of mindfulness, in our spiritual practice, in the Noble Eightfold Path, the three most important factors are right view, right mindfulness, and right method. Right view cannot function by itself. Right mindfulness and right view also cannot function by itself. Cannot? Cannot, right? There's this joke that I keep on repeating. This Ajahn Brahm joke. I'm plagiarizing him. Ajahn Brahm, he says that, well, there's one guy in Australia, one rich man, and he's got someone who's working for him. And one day he wanted to go and listen to Ajahn Brahm's talk at night. And he told the guard, okay, you take care of the house, right? Be mindful. Make sure that it's not burgled or anything like that. I'm going to listen to Ajahn Brahm's talk. So he went off and listened to the talk, had a good time, enjoying Ajahn Brahm's jokes. And then when he came back home, he was surprised to see that the whole house was burgled. And then he accosted his help and said, hey, I thought I asked you to be mindful. And I said, yeah, I was mindful. You know, when the thief came in, I said, oh, thief coming in. And the thief taking. So then I'm like, run away. That's being mindful. I'm just noting, I'm just saying things. You need to put in effort as well, you know. You cannot just be mindful that, you know, okay, this is Aggacitta, this is Kusala, I'm not doing anything about it, right? You know that it's unmindful, you have to put in the effort to abandon it. You know it's unwholesome, you have to put in the effort to abandon it. If you know that wholesome states have not yet arisen, you must take the trouble to go and arouse it. Go and look for the causes and conditions for arousing wholesome states and to maintain them. Now, effort is also very important. Okay, coming back to this riddle, this Q&A between Undaba, Brahmin and the Buddha. Okay, now, let's throw back the question. Why is the refuge of Sati liberation? Looking at it from the Noble Eightfold Path, Sati is very busy. He's always got to look back to identify what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. Right? Got a lot of work to do. That's a very tiresome job. And this job will only end with liberations. Liberation, less job already. You don't have wholesome and unwholesome after you are liberated. There's no more wholesome or unwholesomeness after you are liberated. There's nothing else for Sati to do. So I think that's why that is the safe haven for Sati, holiday. Why is the refuge of liberation Nibbana? Why is Nibbana a safe haven for liberation? What is liberation and what is Nibbana? Are they not the same? The liberation refers to the mind of an awakened person, liberated from the asavas, liberated from the cankers, liberated from the influxes or influences or whatever you want to call them. That is liberation. Nibbana is something else. Nirvana is a state that is to be realized by the liberated one. Liberation is the end result of the process of purification. Nirvana is an external state, it's outside. I mean, when you are liberated from the asavas, at the moment you are not liberated from samsara yet, until you die. Right? Not until you attain Parinibbana.
Wait for that.
You got to wait for that. You got to wait for that. A liberated person, although he's got no more wholesome and unwholesome mental states that will arise in him, still has the dukkha of this body. He's still got to feed it, got to clean it, we've got to take care of this body, and still have to relate with people. And you can only really be free from all these things when there's Parinibbana. The person who is liberated is an arahant. But even though one is an arahant, one still has this body to go. You still have to take care of this body, right? That's also suffering. So only when Parinibbana is reached, when this life ends, then no more rebirth, no more suffering. Totally free. That is Nibbana itself. So that's why Sati is so important. Sati is the Patisarana or the refuge of the mind. Okay, so wholesome and unwholesome states need to be recognized. You need right effort to abandon unwholesome states and prevent them from arising if they have not arisen yet. And then also to arouse yet unarisen wholesome states, and once they have arisen, to maintain and cultivate them to fulfillment. That's what all of you here are trying to do. I would also like to return to what I said earlier, that I'm trying to encourage all of you, try to integrate the practice into your daily life. And that's why I don't stress so much on sitting for long. And there are no timetables here, fixed schedules here, for you to sit like in some centers, you sit 1 hour, walk 1 hour, sit 1 hour, walk 1 hour, or sit 1.5 hours, 10 minutes break, come back again, sit now 1.5 hours. It's totally free. You have to have self-discipline, because when you go back, there's not going to be a teacher breathing down your neck. You must learn to be independent and rely on yourself. And Brother T was sharing with us his experience. Actually, this is second retreat. But before that, he has been listening to my Dharma talks in CD. And in my Dharma talks, I also talk about integrating the idea or the concept of anicca, dukkha, anatta into one's daily life. And he's been doing that, and he found that he has made a lot of changes in his life. Very, very significant changes. And that's how one measures spiritual progress. Not how long you can sit without moving. You may be an excellent yogi, you can sit for 2 hours without moving, but when you go back to the world, you can still be as bad-tempered as ever, or even more conceited because you can sit so long. And you may not even see anicca, dukkha, anatta because you are absorbed in the peace and tranquility of static samadhi. So, even in the suttas, the Buddha says that you should use both reflection as well as bhavana. And so it must be a combination of both. In fact, one starts off with sanya. Sanya is a perception which is also memory. You learn all this theory and then you put it in your mind. When you learn, you're actually using both sanya and sati. Sanya is the one that registers in your memory, and sati is the one that recalls what has been memorized. Also, sanya is spontaneous memory. When you look at something, immediately you can recognize it. Oh, that's so and so, that's a book, that's a pen, that's a car, right? You don't have to think about it. But sati is volitional memory. For example, you misplaced your keys, and then you have to think, oh, where did I put my keys? What was the last thing I did when I forgot my key? You have to go and think and try to recall deliberately. That is sati. And sati, of course, you have got anicca sati and samma sati. Anicca sati is wrong sati and samma sati is right sati. Right sati is whatever sati that is helpful to you to walk the Noble Eightfold Path to achieve liberation. But you may have sati which is not the samma sati, which is miccha sati, but it's still helpful for you in your daily life to earn a living. In your relationship with people, you still need to have sati. That is the refuge of the mind. Right? Okay, so that's it. Very important to look back at your mind, try to integrate it in your practice. We must first of all try to establish a degree of composure. That's why we need to go through these steps, these basic steps. First step is to bring your attention to be aware of the senses, and then secondly to relax, because many of us can be stuck at the second step. You try too hard, you become tense, and that's when your mind is not composed. Right? So for some of you, particularly those who are very target-oriented and perfectionists, this second step is very important. Every now and then come back and check your body, check your mind. Is the mind too tense? Are you trying too hard? Is there expectations in your mind? Is the body tense? A tense body is usually an indication that there's something wrong with your mind. Okay, so once you have attained this composure by repeating these 3 steps, going round and round and round, and your mind will settle down. Initially, you might feel that it's a lot of work to keep track of what's happening to the senses, because there's so many things happening. Well, like I said, that's only because you're a beginner. It's just like when you are beginning to learn how to drive a car. How difficult it is. Or when the first time you try to ride a bicycle, how many times do you fall? And you have to get up again and try again, get up again and try again. And finally, when you can ride it so well, you don't even have to hold the handle. Yeah, you can see how people ride bicycles without holding the handle, and they can even go up and down, jump a ramp without holding the handle. And for you, once you've mastered how to drive the car, you can drive from one destination to another, yakking with your friend next door, and don't realize that you've really reached it. It's as simple as that. So it's the same. It may appear to be difficult for a beginner. It's very, very useful, because when you get the hang of it, you can practice anytime, anywhere, as long as you remember to do so. You don't have to wait to come for a retreat. If I were to stress a lot on 1 hour sitting, 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting, 1 hour walking, and make you great yogis who can sit for 2-3 hours, when you go back home, how are you going to do that? You won't be able to do that and say, okay, I'll wait next year and come again. That's what most people say. I can't move around slowly like a zombie and label every little thing that happens to me, seeing, hearing, smelling. How am I going to work? Right? So I'm not asking you to label. That's why I say no need to label, no need to walk slowly. Go in a normal pace. Train yourself, train your mind to be aware of itself. Because no matter how fast your body moves, the mind is faster than the body. It's a matter of training the mind to look back at itself. So once you have gained composure of mind, you're more settled, you're not so easily ruffled, your senses, then there's a time when you start to investigate. Investigate into how your thoughts arise, how they are formed, the contents of the thoughts, how your thoughts are based on beliefs, assumptions, expectations, and so forth. This occurs a lot when you are doing your daily activities. And when you're seated, you don't have much thoughts, right? You're just seated, just being aware of interesting sounds around, nature, not much thoughts. But when you go out, you meet somebody, thoughts arise. You start to criticize, you start to comment, and then your habitual reactions will arise. That's the best time for you to do psychotherapy on yourself. Find out where all these comes from, and how much suffering you are causing to yourself and to others by holding on to these assumptions and unrealistic expectations and desires. Okay? So I hope that you won't take this lightly. Try to train your mind to be aware of itself all the time. And then hopefully you'll be able to benefit and really appreciate the Buddha's teaching. Okay? Right.